As a builder on Botpress, businesses will pay you not just to convert their leads, but to convert the right ones. My chatbots have spoken to 800 plus people, but in truth, only around 200 of them have actually converted. But these 200 have been the right people. In this video, I will show you the 3 Botpress building techniques that I use to make sure that my chatbots can qualify users and only convert the best ones. So this first method is for you if you want to qualify the user without asking a question, but using semantics. So semantics are basically the bot being able to form a conclusion about how the user is feeling or a certain situation that they're in based on the things that they are saying. So what you can do is you can give the user a prompt instead of having to ask them a question. And then without them even knowing that you're qualifying them, you can have the bot use semantics to group the user into multiple categories. What this means is that the user doesn't feel like they're being interrogated because there's no question that's being asked directly to them. And instead they feel like they're actually speaking to someone with a listening ear, because then your bot is actually listening, is letting them talk about themselves, their problem, their situation, and then is using that to make a decision on the back end. So the first thing you'd want to do is create a prompt that would get the user talking. And let's imagine that we're building a qualification bot for a digital marketing agency. A prompt that we can ask is, what have you been doing to fix your lead generation issue? And let's say the objective of this prompt is to qualify the user into 2 categories. Number 1, they have a lot of money because they've invested into quite a lot of things to try and solve an issue. Or number 2, they don't have a lot of money because they haven't invested into a lot of things. So we're trying to understand what monetary category the user is in. So after this, you'd want to have a wait for user input card just to get the bot to actually listen to what the user will say. And then from here, we're going to push it into AI. Now, if you've been building on Botpress traditionally, you might be tempted to use the AI transition card, put in the text to categorize here from the input, and then just create a bunch of categories that relate to this question. And while that can work, I wouldn't recommend it, because what you're doing is you're not actually giving the AI context to what the question was asked. You're only giving it the text to categorize. So for example, if the user responds with a paragraph, that text would be here, and it would try to push that into one of these 3 or whatever categories you've put, but it doesn't actually understand the question that the user was asked. And so it doesn't have full context on what the semantics are of the user's response. So instead, what I would do is I would actually use an AI task. So I would have that here, and then in the instructions you want to put this. So you can see in the instructions I've put the user was asked, what have you been doing to fix your lead generation issue? And then I've told it that the response will be stored in the input below. So here in the input we would say users response, and then we'll just put event.preview. Actually goes up there. There we go. So in the input is the user's response here. Event.preview is a variable that always stores the user's most recent message. So that will be here from this. And then I've told it there's 3 categories, and it must use semantics to figure out which category the user's in. So you can see the 3 categories here. But what we want to do is tell it to store one of these numbers in the result variable. So first of all, we want to create the result variable, workflow.decision, and I'll actually change that to number, and then here we'll put workflow.decision. So basically it will analyze the user's response, use semantics to group it into one of these 3 categories, namely they've invested a lot, they've done barely anything, and then also they haven't tried, and then it will store the appropriate number here. And then from here, you can just come in and create expression cards to send the user into a different direction based on their response. So essentially now, because you've qualified them using that their response to that question, you can kind of now send them down a different path. For example, you prompt them to book an appointment, or for example ask them another question to find out if they're really the type you want to work with, etc. So to do this, you want to turn off this AI mode on the expression card, and then over here just type workflow dot decision is equal to 1. So that's the first criteria, and then we can copy card, paste it twice, and you simply want to change this to 2. So, and then the last one to 3. There we go. And then from here you can branch out accordingly to the different places that you want to go to. So I won't build anything beyond this point, except I'll just add text cards. So if the decision variable contains 1, it means that the user has done a lot of investment in trying to fix the issue. So here I'll put well done, we want to work with you. And then here I'll copy this card and paste it here, and I'll just say we need to know if you're determined enough. And then the last one, I'll just say sorry, we only work with high effort people. And then we can actually test this out. So if I go ahead and say hi, you can see what have you been doing to fix your lead generation issue. Let me say so I've typed in a bunch of stuff, fictitious stuff that I would have done to fix the issue. So you can see there's a lot of stuff, and if I send that in, you should see that it takes me up here to this path. Well done, we want to work with you. But if I repeat that and I say I've only done maybe 1 or 2 of these things, it will probably send me here. And if I say I've done nothing, it will send me to the bottom. You can test that out for yourself. But that's how you build the semantic-based user qualification system. Now this next one is a little similar. It also uses semantics. However, it doesn't have fixed outputs. So essentially, it's for if you're qualifying the user based on something that's on a spectrum. In other words, something that can be ranked from like 1 to 10. So once again, we use AI. So I'll literally just copy this node and put it down here. And I'll keep the same question, in fact. What have you been doing to fix your business? And I'll copy this as well. But down here instead, we shall have basically, instead of changing it to store values here, we should just tell it. So from here, we're basically telling it to rate the user's response. And I'm basically telling it to output a number from 1 to 10, 1 being they have tried nothing, and 10 being they have tried like 5+ things and invested in trying to fix the issue. And then from here, we can change these to output it into different places based on where it is. So I'll start with this first one, and I'll say if it is workflow decision is greater than or equal to, let's say 7, it will go there. And then if I copy this, I can come to the next card and I can say if it's greater than or equal to like 4. And then for the last one, it will just be the default card. So in fact, I can delete this and just let it flow into the default card. And then you can essentially, once again, send the user down to different paths. In fact, I'll just move these down here. And what I'll do is I'll actually add a third node and a wait for user input card so that I can get the bot to pause before ending the conversation, just so that you can see the value that is stored in the decision variable. So once again, let's go ahead and test this. So I've said hi, I've sent the list of things that I've tried, and then it will think, and you can see it has sent me up here. And in the decision variable, it has stored 9 out of 10. So it has rated my work ethic 9 out of 10 because I've done 4 things. I've invested quite a lot in trying to do this. But if I restart this conversation and say hi, and if I send 1 reason now, you should see that it will change that. And you can see it has sent me down the middle, and it has ranked me 5 out of 10 because I at least tried something. And because it was really expensive, that's probably why it has ranked me a 5. But it has sent me down a different path. So that's the second way to qualify people based on rank. Essentially, you're ranking their response from 1 to 10 and then sending them down a different path accordingly. But now this third method is for you if honestly your qualification is binary, so it's very, very simple. So for example, you're asking someone, do you have a dog? Yes or no? Such questions. So for yes or no questions, you can go with a very, very, very simple method, and I'll actually walk you through it now. So I'll actually change the question because this question is not really yes or no, but I'll change this to, do you have a dog? And then you can use this single choice card to prompt them to make a choice. So this will give them buttons. So you can say yes, no, yes, and no. There we go. And then what that will look like in chat is this. So you can see, do you have a dog? Make a choice from the list below, yes or no. And then depending on what they click to say yes, you can lead them down a certain path, or you can lead them down another path. But what if your question is not yes or no? What if it's something like, which color do you prefer, blue or red? Once again, we can actually do the same thing. If we come down here, we can either change these to blue and then red. That way the user kind of gets those. Oops, forgot to change the second one. So this should be, so that way the user gets the buttons blue and red. But if you don't want to use buttons, there's another way to do it. Once again, we would take the raw input. So you can use this to collect what they're gonna say and store that in a variable, or you could just use the wait for input card to get the bot to wait for the user to make an input. And then you can finally use the common AI transition card that everyone loves. And in the text to categorize, you can just put event.preview, the user's most recent message. And then the categories, you can put blue or red. And so what this uses is it uses AI to basically understand the meaning of the user's response in natural language and kind of translate that to one of these two transitions here and transition out. But one important thing that you need to do is, number one, force classify if you want the user to always flow one of these. So what if the user sends a vague answer such as orange, but you still want to just randomly force them down one, you can select force classify. If you don't want to do so, you don't have to select force classify. But what will happen is it will not send the user down any of these, and so the conversation will just end down here unless you had some other card that would be run after that. You can also select the language model that it will use to process the user's input. I recommend that you keep this at something cheap, such as Llama. Where is it? Llama 3.18b, very low cost. Because this is a very simple question, blue or red, the AI will get that. But if you're asking the user a more complex question and you still have using this AI transition card, you might probably want to use a slightly an LLM with slightly higher capacity so that it can understand what the user is saying. But just to prove to you that it works, once again, I'll show you. I'll put these up here. You like blue, and then I'll put this other card down here saying you like red. So there we go. Hi, which color do you prefer? And I say I love blue. You can see it has gone up here. You like blue. So the user doesn't have to type in exactly what you put in here. It doesn't mean they have to type in exactly blue. As long as they are able to convey that they either like blue or red, then it's going to be able to classify them into one of these two. Last thing that you need to know about qualifying leads is that you need to understand how people respond to these qualification questions that you ask them within the chatbot. The best way to do this is by tracking your conversations and being able to show the business owner that you built a chatbot for how people respond to these questions so that they can make decisions, whether to adjust the qualification question or to ask a completely different question that people actually respond in a constructive way to. I personally use Airtable to track all the conversations that my AI chatbots have on Botpress and to create an interface so that the business owners who I built chatbots for can use to see the conversations that are happening inside their chatbot. So your next step is learning how to connect Airtable to your Botpress chatbot so that you can actually use it to store and to analyze conversations that it's having with its users. So check out my video up here where I teach you how to integrate Airtable to Botpress.